Oh, wait. Oh, see?
It's Susan.
There we go. There we go.
Over under.
What's the date today?
Wow.
Yes, today's the 19th. Still 6:30.
Okay. Good evening. It's 6:30, September 19th. This is the Sutton Finance and Warrant Advisory Committee, and we'll begin our meeting tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So tonight, we are going to hold a public hearing on the town warrant. And it's just after 6:30, and we'll open the public hearing. And Town Manager Jim Smith, if you could lead us through.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll give you a brief update on where we're at in the fiscal year. Obviously, it's just beginning, but we are in the process of closing the books. Tim, I think, has closed the books officially, has submitted the balance sheet to DOR for free cash certification. That's in process. We don't have what that number will be, but we will be appropriating some free cash at the fall town meeting. That number is yet to be decided, and I think that's Article, is it 2?
Yep.
Yeah, I
Yes,
think it's
Article
Article 2. So some of the free cash will be appropriated within that article as a result of the Board of Selectmen policy that 10% of free cash is committed to the OPEB liability for the town.
Yep.
On other news, I did have a meeting with Dr. Fitzpatrick this afternoon, with a number of other managers from the Blackstone Valley. We talked about a number of issues with an effort to really focus on the communication and try to improve that. He did give us some numbers. Typically we wait till October 1 for the October 1 count. But he had the actual numbers of students attending Blackstone Valley. So that was helpful to get those numbers. Good news for some communities, not good news for other communities. But it seems like relatively good news for Sutton. He told us that 4 additional students are attending Blackstone. I had anticipated 10 in that ballpark because that's the number that got accepted. So I don't know where those 10 students ended up going. But in the end, 4 apparently decided to go to Blackstone. So we're working with that number, and at some point in the fall, we'll do a gap analysis and figure out where we are at that point in time. So that's all I have. I'll give you the free cash number. I'll email that to you,
Sure.
Jeff. You may even be on the CC from DOR.
Okay.
But you'll get that number and you can forward it to the board members when it's certified.
Okay.
May I ask you a question before he gets into the article?
Sure.
So when we did the budget last year, we were anticipating plus 10 at BVT, correct?
That's correct. Well, what happens is, okay,
Well,
you wanna finish your question?
Okay, so
The answer is
you can
yes.
say, if that's correct.
Yes, that's correct.
But-
For the
but
FY19 budget.
But 6 students didn't go.
No. It's always a year behind. So right now, the official count as of October 1, we need to budget that for 2020.
Oh, so.
So we
we
budgeted-
had
it was the
10, so
official
now we'll have
count
4
and-
more. Okay.
FY18, 17, that gave us the count, those 10 additional students for the FY19 budget. It's just the way it is. It's always been that way. It's a year behind.
Okay.
And I believe the current senior and junior classes are the lower counts of what we have. So the freshman class right now and maybe the sophomore class all had big increases. We were anticipating another big increase of 10 and figuring we're gonna probably end up with that same level over 4 grades as we go forward. That seemed to be our number. So we're anticipating 10 for 2020, and then I'm not sure what we do for 2021. It looks like we're only gonna get 4, so it's not gonna be as bad as we were thinking. You know, we were always thinking a year ahead.
Mhm.
We were thinking we'd have another 10, but it looks like it's only another 4. So like, it's good news and bad news. Still an increase of 4.
Okay, thank you. So just one other thing, relative to the conversations that we had about, you know, them increasing staff and doing other things, did you have an opportunity to talk about any of that and the other things that they're doing, which are, whether you want to argue or not, were really not technical school things, but were, you know, more things that we offer here at our high school?
We met for an hour and a half. We had discussions on OPEB. We had discussions on healthcare. We had discussions on the rate of increase in last fiscal year of 4.74%. You know, he does have a plan to begin addressing OPEB. He receives a donation from a previous student of Blackstone Valley. They didn't need that property, so they're selling that property. They're going to take the proceeds from that property and put that towards OPEB. It's a start. It's probably a few $100,000, but much better than the $15,000 that he presented to us at
Right. Yep.
last March's meeting. We talked about healthcare. He got the message that he is not quite doing enough on healthcare. His plan is to implement Chapter 32B, Section 18 through 21, which is the new health mandate authorizing pretty much unilateral decision-making on behalf of an entity, in this case, the superintendent of the schools. So he will start that process. That his committee has full authority. The only downside is they have to give 25% of all the savings to the unions, but that's just 1-year payment. After that, it's 100% savings for Blackstone Valley. And that, if he does go through that, his plan is to implement HSAs across the board. One plan, HSA only, either 1,500, 3,000, or 2,000, 4,000. That should save a significant amount of money. So the message was sent, I think, to pay attention to what you're presenting to various committees. And we did talk about meeting in late January after the governor's budget, and then he'll have more additional information at that point in time.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
I think it's important, and we talked about this when he was in here last year, to get him and Julie Mitchell as well, to have a discussion here to deliver that message, as opposed to getting the budget after it's been printed and bound and, you know.
Well, listen, you
The
know,
night of.
he was pretty good coming to this meeting. He didn't even have the agenda. It was emailed to him 3 hours beforehand. So, but he came and answered any questions that were had, and got a little heated back and forth. But I don't think he'd have any issue with coming in at an earlier date, let's say late January, to talk to this committee.
Good.
So. Okay. Anyway, that's all I have by way. You have anything else updates?
Nope.
I'll turn this over to Tim now. He's been involved with this. Article number 1 is revoting the annual budget, and we'll talk about all those differences.
All right, so article number 1, it's what we end up doing every fall once the state budget is finalized. So the net effect to the town, by the time we had an increase in Chapter 70 and an increase in our cherry sheet charges, it was a net decrease to the town of $6,407. And then the second line down, I'll go through where we're going to spend this money, but the second line down, increase, raise, and appropriate from local receipts, $59,711 is just the number I need to take care of the increased expenditures that follow. So the net increase in revenue to the FY19 budget will be $53,304. And the way it's going to be spent, we're giving the extra Chapter 70 to the school, as we've always done in the past. That's $13,980. since we put together the budget last spring and it was voted in May, we've had a couple additional veterans come on the benefits rolls. So projecting out now into the end of the year, looks like we're gonna be short about $22,000. So I wanna take care of that now instead of next June, July time period. We looked at, once the union contracts, all the new rates were put in the budget, and we did a check of, make sure everything was in line now instead of waiting till June. There was maybe 4 or 5 accounts that are gonna be short a little bit here and there. Came up to $2,324. I'm asking to take care of it now instead of asking
In
for
June.
a year-end transfer to cover it. And hopefully we'll be all set. Cable access, $3,000. If you recall, we transferred some money at the end of the year to cover increased in health insurance costs for the employees of the cable access
Right.
department. That wasn't known when we put together the May budget, so this hopefully will take care of that for 19, and hopefully 19's will end the year on budget.
So that means next year's budget will be increased by $3,000?
The 19 budget, yes.
Yeah.
So these two items, the wages, the cable, and even the veteran benefits, I'm hoping this will take care of, eliminate those as year-end transfers. So trying to get the
Okay.
year-end transfers down to as little as possible.
Yep.
By taking care of things that we know of right now, there's an opportunity to take care of these. And the last one is internet. It's actually iCloud storage. I guess the long and the short of the story is we haven't paid for our iCloud storage in about 3 years. There was miscommunication between the vendor. We never got billed. They sent us a bill out of nowhere. They wanted 3 years. There was some negotiation. They decided, yeah, they made a mistake. They're not gonna ask for the money in arrears, but going forward, we've already gotten the bill. This is what we'll be paying per year, so we gotta put this money in the budget.
Is that a contracted amount, or would that be negotiated every year, or is 12,000 gonna be the number for going forward?
It is, it's an agreement with iCloud Google Storage. The school department is on the same system of sorts. I don't know
Yeah.
what the official word is, but they get it for free because of the school department. There's some issue with Google and
Education,
school
yeah.
departments, but the town has to pay for it. So I think Dan Durgan, our IT person, wants to keep us on the same platform
Yep.
going forward, so. And it's an annual contract.
Okay.
So that pretty much takes care of Article 1.
Can you just talk about the local receipts and the increase there? The source of that?
Instead of taking it from, instead of raise and appropriate from real estate taxes or new growth, I decided it made more sense to take it from local receipts because our local receipts are running pretty consistently above budget.
Okay.
So there was room to.
It's like excise tax and things like that.
Yes. Yeah, all the inspection fees. I mean, even interest income is way up. You know, I think we did pretty well in fiscal 18, and I think it makes sense to push local receipts up a little bit.
Okay.
Article 2, there's actually a few pieces that are gonna be put together to put together this transfer to the OPEB. Jim already mentioned one of it is, 2 of them are, well, actually all 3 of them are coming from our OPEB funding policy. So, number 2 of the policy, 100% of rental income received from the cell tower located on Town Farm Road. So, we received 1 check before June 30 of 18. It was about 13,000?
No, it was,
I actually have it, I'm sorry, I should just look it up.
I think it was 32,000.
You're probably right. Yes, it was $32,670.94. So, I put in, I believe I put in 32,000, just round, made an even number, so.
Yep.
32,000 is gonna come of free cash. It has to do with the cell tower receipts. Line number 3 is unrelated surplus. The Board of Assessors voted last night to release $50,000 of the overlay, which we will add to this article, appropriate that into the OPEB. And then number 4 in the policy is the transfer 10% of free cash certified at the end of the prior fiscal year. If I tell you what that 10% is, it's gonna give you an idea of what I think the free cash number is. So I probably should just hold off on that number for now.
Oh, jeez.
I'll email you that when we get the free cash.
I'll
number.
look forward to that. That'd be great.
10% of it you want, huh?
Well, that's the policy the
That's
board
the
has.
Yeah, I
policy.
know, I
Right.
know, I know.
So this is over and above what's in what we had budgeted to put into the OPEB,
Yes, we've already,
to the 100.
the town has put in 100,000,
Right.
the sewer department put in 5,000, so we've already put in 105,000.
Yep.
This is gonna be in addition to that.
And what will approximately this bring the balance in the OPEB trust to?
Nice try. You can do math. You're the chair of the
Aside from,
finance
aside,
committee.
I know you
aside
can.
from the free cash piece. Well, let me just say,
Probably
before any of this transfers, how much do we have in there?
1.3, 1.25.
Somewhere around, okay,
Yeah, in that area.
okay.
Couldn't get the thunder out of him, huh?
Thank you.
Just a quick question on the, you get one check on the rental income on the cell tower.
Yes.
That's a quarterly check, you said?
No, that's probably for close to a year, because the 1-year due diligence period came up in the spring of this last spring. Now we're receiving, I believe, quarterly checks. So we just received a check for
About 13,000.
13,000. So, you know, we need to work it out on how it's going to happen, but, you know, they're on track to do us quarterly at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's see, one more article of mine, I guess. No, actually, there's 2 more. Article number 3, prior year invoices. We have one for the sewer department. There was an article, retained earnings article for an I&I study. There was a contract, and it turned out that the costs were more than anticipated in this I&I study, and they're short 17,000?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In that area.
So there'll be a transfer from sewer department retained earnings to cover that prior year bill. And the last money article is number 5. We are going to raise and appropriate from the new growth. We're gonna ask for $150,000 to go into the special education tuition stabilization fund. That will bring the fund up to $350,000, which is in accordance with the SPED stabilization funding policy. We want to, the item number 4 is, the goal is to maintain a minimum of $200,000 in the fund with a maximum of $350,000. So that will
Right.
bring us up to the max of $350,000.
So there's, I think, and also a provision there with interest income being added to that. That won't be operative anymore because we've hit the max, is that right?
No, the interest will always stay with it.
It will, so it'll be 350 plus interest, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
And our hope is the school department never needs this money, to be honest.
Sure.
I mean, they budget for special ed costs at the beginning of the fiscal year, and, you know, hopefully we don't need it. If we
Right.
do need it, there's, you know, it's a stabilization. You need 2/3 vote of town meeting. You need the town manager and the superintendent to go to the various boards, get approval from both boards, to go to town meeting, and then a 2/3 vote. So it's a, you know, high level of approval
Right.
for that. Article 4 is to add an additional member to the school building committee. This last May, Wendy Mead was elected to the Board of Selectmen. She's the chairperson of the school building committee.
This police station's,
Police
police
station or
station building.
school?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Please.
Police
Police
station,
station, okay.
obviously. So she's the chair of the police station building committee. She got elected to the Board of Selectmen. The earliest town meeting is the fall, and then we're gonna make it official to appoint 2 members of the Board of Selectmen. Jesse Lemanik is currently on the police station building committee, and this makes it legit as far as the public goes.
Let me ask you a question on that.
Sure.
I don't mean, I'm just thinking as a citizen, do we need 2 people on the selectmen to be on the board?
No, but the fact is the project is, wrapping up. obviously the external work is pretty much done. They're roughing out the internal work, the electrical and the plumbing and so forth. So we're pretty close to finish. But, you know, I think we just keep the committee in place with the 3 or 4 months left remaining.
And nobody else wants to be chairman, so.
Yeah, not me.
Yeah. We've got good representation, though. That's great.
We do. Article 6 is to see if the town will authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into a lease agreement for the sale of the gravel at the gravel pit. The gravel pit, we attempted to do this 10 years ago, actually, in 2008. We actually had a different scenario. We were trying to sell the 25 acres of land, the end of hatchery, all including the 8 or 9 acres in the gravel pit area. We did receive a bid of $1.5 million. It was from aggregate, but the Board of Selectmen set a minimum bid of $2 million. So the bid wasn't accepted. It was early on, and that's the way it went. We left it alone. We haven't taken any gravel out of that pit since then because it's a danger. I don't recommend anybody take it out in the current condition. And since, I think, this year, there's new regulations at the state. OSHA is now applicable to municipalities. In the past, it wasn't. So we now have OSHA regulations, and OSHA would be all over us if they saw, you know, a shovel going into that hill. So now we've got a pile full of gravel that is just, you know, growing trees on it, and there's value there. So we're trying to sell that gravel to a potential bidder. I've had a number of inquiries from different gravel companies in the area interested in that material. So we're going through the process. The first step in that process is to get town meeting authority, authorization to sell the material. Mm-hmm. And then there's a specific process as laid out by Chapter 30B, Section 16B, that establishes the whole policy. The first step is to hire an appraiser to establish the value of the land. In the past, 10 years ago, we hired Alan Foster from the Foster Company, did a great job for us. And we are looking for a little bit of revenue to hire that appraiser, which is required by state law.
Yep.
Now, Jim, is there an expense in getting the gravel pit opened on our part as far as taking those hills down, or?
Well, that's really means and methods of the contractor. They will have to establish that and submit plans to us on how they intend to do that. You know, it's kind of early in the process whether we're going to establish time frames, requirements. You know, if you put a lot of staff and equipment on that hill, you could probably take it down, I don't know, 6 months to a year, but that's a lot of work going 24/7 on that hill. That's a big hill.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, my guess is it'll take a couple years to take that hill down, and we'll have to provide access and all those other issues. We'll have to negotiate with aggregate because they share half of the hill, the other half. The hill is actually split down the middle, half on aggregate property, half on the town of Sutton. The town of Sutton actually owns 55%, aggregate owns 45%. So there's quite a bit of negotiation that needs to go on. I'm just starting this process, one step at a time, baby steps kind of thing. But we, you know, our attorneys are well aware of this. We've been advised by, you know, Sharon Everett from Copeland and Page, and she's walking us through this process.
Good. Okay.
So we can remove, assuming we remove the gravel, then we still own the land, and then we can do something else with that.
We do. You know, it really gives us a seat at the table ultimately if the aggregate bigger parcel goes for some sort of land development. We now have a say in what's going on as a landowner, not just the town of Sutton. So,
Well, you have rail, water, and sewage there?
Yeah.
Oh, that makes for a nice, interesting piece of real estate when it's all done.
Potentially. Article number 7 is to acquire an easement at the, on Reservoir Ave, just before the water tank. We need to, our plan is to provide at that telephone pole go underground by conduit with fiber and electrical to the communications tower on top of the Manchog water tower. So that means getting an easement to cross that property. The back of that property, south, is owned by Metacomet Land Trust. Metacomet is in discussions with the owner in the front of that property, from Reservoir Ave to the water tank, to trying to acquire that property for an in-kind or donation of some sort. The current owner lives in Florida, an older woman, and my belief is that we will be negotiating with Metacomet Land Trust within the next month or so. But this is to give the town meeting, to give the Board of Selectmen to be able to enter into a lease or an easement agreement, because it's officially, real estate property we're dealing with. Article number 8 is to, the sewer commissioners are sponsoring this, to see if the town will authorize the sewer commissioners to use connection fees
Sewer connection fees.
to do design from the villas to the center of town for sewer. It's the first phase in the project. The ultimate goal would be to bring it down to schools and down to Shaw Farm. The first phase, we want to bring it up to the center of town. That leaves Town Hall. We've got a failed septic system, and we pump it out on a regular basis. And I don't really want to go into detail there. It's just not an attractive subject to talk about, but it needs to be addressed unless people want to close down Town Hall and move us to some other place, and I don't know where that would be and everything else. So it also provides sewer to all the landowners along the way, and homeowners on Singletary and Cole Ave, et cetera. So I don't know, right now there are 2 bidders being considered by the Sewer Commission, Graz Engineering and On Site, I think. Was that the other one, Nick?
Yes.
On Site. So both are in the $80,000 to $100,000 area. We did have some high bidders come in that were out of the budget. So the Sewer Commission is going to recommend somebody for town meeting to do the design of this work. When it's done, we'll have stamp plans, an estimate of the work, the cost, and then it's, ultimately we'll look at that, and if town boards feel it's appropriate, go to a future town meeting and ask for an appropriation for the construction of that sewer line.
So the sewer commissioners met yesterday, and they voted to appropriate $100,000 from the sewer connection fees. That account has about $940,000 in it.
Do you know what the retained earnings balance is?
It'll be certified around 150, 180, somewhere around there.
I was just
150?
asking. The retained
The
earnings
returnings,
balances.
retained earnings are between 150 and 200, yeah.
Okay.
But this is coming from the connection fees, which has got excess of 900,000 in it.
Right. So, back in January, when the grad student from WPI came in,
Right.
I think he was talking about, and there was some estimate that he came up with, $1.5 million for the whole project? Not going to school, but is that an operative kind of a number, or who knows?
To be honest, I'd rather defer that to the designer and
Yeah,
see what
okay.
estimate he comes
All right.
up with. The grad student did terrific work, but, he didn't produce plans
Right, okay.
that for construction, so it may be in the $1.5, $2 million
Okay.
range. I don't
Yeah.
honestly know.
All right.
You know, we could go further into this subject, but, you know, we're doing it in phases. If the second phase would be going down to the school department, there are issues with that. For one, you would take the school department off the gray water system and close that system down. DEP loves that system, that it regenerates recycled water. And, you know, DEP is all about water conservation. If we bring sewer down there, we won't need that recycling plant anymore. Then the other issue is water. What is the well capacity? We have 3 wells down there. You know, we generally rely on 2 of them. And I don't know that well capacity is strong enough to provide water to flush the toilets and all the other needs that are necessary for you know, the arrangement if we bring sewer down there. So then it raises another question, you know, what are we going to do with water if we bring sewer down there? You know, we'd have to consider either digging a new well or getting a water supplier, either from Aquarian and Millbury or from Whitensville, Wilkinsonville Water. But that's a bigger project. They're tight on their capacity.
So it's not just an easy, we're going to save 150 from the school department budget?
No.
Yeah.
No, and we've looked at that a number of different times, and it's a great in concept, but the reality of it's complicated. And, you know, to be honest, we haven't spent the time digging into that at this point in time.
Okay. Thoughts on that?
No, fine.
Article number 9, Jen, you can come on up.
even start talking and
Yeah, come on up. Join the party. Article number 9 is essentially for the Board of Selectmen is sponsoring this article to eliminate the solar overlay zone. That was created, a year ago? 2 years ago. And there was one proposed adjacent in Purgatory Road along 146. That has not been developed, and the board felt after this last Maytown meeting it was time to eliminate this overlay district entirely and go back to the 250 kilowatts allowed in a residential section that the planning board created 6 years ago at a special town meeting with Mackey's proposal to put a solar farm up at his tree farm on DeWitt Road. So the board voted unanimously that they all wanted to support that, and they heard the residents at the Maytown meeting, and they wanted to be in front of it.
Okay.
All right, so the planning board held their hearing on these articles on September 10th. On Article 9, they voted unanimously to recommend that town meeting approve the article. They came at it from a slightly different angle. Basically, as Jim touched on, the solar overlay district right now consists of one parcel, and that one parcel can't be used for solar. So their viewpoint was it needs to be cleaned up. That parcel needs to be eliminated. It can't be used for solar. When you eliminate the parcel, you effectively eliminate the district. You can't outlaw the zoning concept of overlays. That's not legal. So you're not really, should a beneficial proposal come forward in the future, you're not really blocking that by eliminating this, but somebody would have to come back through the town meeting process, reestablish the overlay, and town meeting would have to be supportive of whatever area that individual or that group was planning on adding to the district. So they see it as more of a housekeeping. There's one parcel in it, can't use the parcel, get rid of it. Okay?
Yep.
All right, number 10, 11, 12, and 13 were brought to the planning board by Clara Kim. She lives in Worcester right now on Egan Ave. She is building a house on 9 Stone Circle off Lackey Dam and will move to town shortly. And she kind of got embroiled in the solar 3 solar proposals that came by petition to the last town meeting. To her credit, she did just a ton of research on solar bylaws, investigating over 30 towns' regulations on this subject, and actually had all the signatures she needed to pull these articles by petition to this town meeting. But she did come to the planning board, discuss them with the board, and said, you know what, will you sponsor them? And the board said, you know what, as of last town meeting, it's clear the town meeting wants some input on this, they have some strong feelings about this, so we will sponsor them from the viewpoint of, we think they're worthy of discussion. So the planning board took over those articles and sponsored all 4. You'll see what looks like a conflict on that sponsorship as we go through. It's really not. Okay. So number 10 just says, if a large system is permitted within the residential districts or the village district, it also has to get a special permit. Right now, you only have to go through site plan approval. So you don't really have the legal authority to say yes or no to a project unless there's a life safety issue. This would require a special permit as well as site plan review, which gives you the yes-no ability, a more broad yes-no ability, certainly not limitless by any means, but also if the town were to deny a project or disapprove a project, a special permit disapproval is much more defensible. It's more easily defensible because it's broader criteria.
Jennifer, who issues the special permit, please?
In this case, the planning board would issue the special permit. So again, you're not making the process more onerous, but because the same board does site plan review and special permitting in this case, but you do have that extra level. They have to grant another permit with a whole nother layer of review. So, so 10 only will apply if 9 doesn't pass, or if at some point in the future, or if 9 does pass, but at some point in the future, somebody brings back the district.
I'm sorry, may I interrupt again? I apologize. But so, I mean, I read it and I saw what you have here. So if you come to the planning board and you ask for this, what's the difference between asking for site plan review and a special permit? You're doing it all at the same time. Is this 2 different meetings? Is it 2 different criteria?
It's 2 different criteria.
Just so, very simply, what's the difference in the criteria?
That's not a simple
Very
question.
simply.
Site plan review is very succinct. It's like X parking spaces for X square feet, this much landscaping, this much is very, very succinct. The only thing that is fluffy in site plan review is like broad landscape requirements in architecture. Special permitting has 5 criteria, and if you read the 5 criteria, they are very broad. One of the criteria is to the effect of, the proposed use shall not create an undue nuisance to traffic and pedestrians. This is extremely broad, where site plan review you're looking at doesn't meet with technical site distance standards, is the vertical curve of the roadway correct, is very, very specific. Special permits have 5 main criteria, and they're very broad.
So there's discretion with the,
A lot of discretion,
as opposed to the site plan review.
a lot of discretion.
So my last question on this is, why is it through the planning board? Why isn't it through the zoning board?
The zoning board tends to have more expertise on residential projects and, by and large, single-family residential matters. So we, in general, in the town of Sutton, when we're granting special permits, industrial special permits, commercial special permits, we usually leave those to the planning board, who's used to seeing those plans and looking at those plans. They still have to review them by the same criteria, and it also avoids the argument, which, as you know, solar is protected to some degree by Mass General law. This also helps avoid any angst in the Attorney General's office that you're trying to drag out a process on certain types of solar projects. In fact, you're not. It's the same public hearing. You do get a whole nother set of criteria, which makes your process a little more flexible and frankly stronger and more defensible. But it eliminates the argument by anybody that you're just tacking time on to make this harder, especially when our zoning board only meets once a month and and you basically have to apply a month before a meeting. So it's hard, it can be a long time to get into the zoning board process.
Thank you.
All right, 11. 11 goes with 10. 11 is the housekeeping that kind of goes along with 10. So as we've discussed, when we did this original, when we put in this footnote 1, when you look at the use table should show you all the uses that are allowed and how. So in this case, it shows through footnote 1 that this large solar use is also allowed in the special permit overlay district. We would then be adding footnote 2, which says installations within these districts, if otherwise permitted, also require a special permit from the planning board. I've already formulated a motion with town council, should Article 9 pass. Footnote 1 goes away, and then we just change our motion to make footnote 2 numbered 1. Okay? So 10 goes with 11. 12. You'll see by our recommendation memo that although the board sponsored this article and they feel it's worthy of discussion, and they are not going to make a motion to pass over this on the town meeting floor, and we haven't quite decided who's gonna make the motion yet, but we'll figure that out, that they do not recommend this article in the current form. They had quite a bit of discussion at the meeting, and there were items like, right now, if you have, say in South Sutton Commerce Park, the edge of the park it backs up to a residential district. So you have a zoning line there. Under our zoning bylaw, that industrial use only has to be 100 feet from that residential lot line. So why would you make a solar installation be 200 feet from a residential lot line when it's pretty quiet compared to an industrial installation? So there was a lot of discussion on that. And the board delved into the existing language of the bylaw and the additional language we're adding through these articles. And it basically came down to, we don't want to mickey with the numbers, because then you're splitting hairs and kind of guessing at that point. Okay, we won't do 100 and 200, we'll do, pull something out of the air. And they didn't want to formulate bylaws that way. One of the members said, I really kind of feel like this one article is more of a reaction. It's not necessarily detailed planning, it's more of a reaction. And while Ms. Kim did go to several towns and look at these kind of numbers, there wasn't anything to kind of compare it to how things work in Sutton necessarily. So in the end, the board voted unanimously to not recommend that town meeting approve this as it's currently written. So, again, they agreed to sponsor these articles. They could have been brought by petition. She had all the signatures, so they think it would be in bad faith to make a motion to pass over this at this point. So there will be a motion on the floor. It will likely be made by, a resident that's been working with Ms. Kim on these issues, but we'll pin that down before town meeting.
So this applies if there is an overlay district. Someday, somehow, if 9 doesn't pass.
Or if there's an overlay someday, yes.
Some future town meeting decides they want to create that.
Yep.
Okay.
Or again, 9 doesn't pass. 13 is really just putting in writing what I already request when filings come in. But as was kind of the case at the last town meeting, there were 3 proposals going to town meeting, not even going to the planning board. And I suggested of all 3 that they might want to give sightline representations, because this is one of the most effective ways to say, if I'm here and your stuff's here, and this is in between, I am going to see it or I'm not going to see it. One of the 3 proponents chose to do that. Another proponent gave some photographs, the other proponent did nothing. I had nothing, I couldn't even say, yeah, but look, our bylaws require it. I realize you're not in the bylaw process, but this is what we would require. So this is just putting that requirement in the bylaws. So, and it was, the draft was like 2 paragraphs long. Mr. Nunemacher pointed out it was a bit of overkill, and the board felt he was correct. So we've much simplified it here and basically said, case by case, and this applies to all large ground-mounted solar. So commercial, industrial, if there's future in the residential, the board will look at it case by case and go, all right, for this installation, we need photographs from here, here, and here. We need sight lines from here, here, and here. So it allows the board to direct exactly what they think the sensitive receptors are and get information from those areas. All right, so that's solar. Bye-bye. All right, 14, deja vu. This is our 4th or 5th iteration of lot width since I've been the planning director. Every time we do a definition of lot width, we find 1,000 reasons why it just doesn't work. So even though there's a lot of sentences here, this is, I think we've come to, this is the most simple.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
It's shorter than the current definition.
That's true.
When you read it, if you use this on a regular basis anyways, when you read it, it's pretty straightforward. And it's not gonna change again. Sorry, this is it, until I retire, okay? So, this is, again, just an attempt to simplify this definition, and take into account some issues we've had using the definition of lot width since we changed it last time. Okay? Article 15's housekeeping.
Do you have a comment or question?
Yeah, this lot width situation, in my opinion over the years, is that there aren't a lot of intelligent people that can read and interpret the definition of the bylaw. And I looked at so many plans that have been submitted to the town, in my opinion, did not meet the lot width requirement as written. And we're changing it yet again here, hopefully to clarify the situation. But there was an A&R, for example, there was an A&R plan submitted to the planning board last week that incorrectly shows the lot width on 2 lots opposite Pleasant Valley. And it just goes on. I can't understand how people can look at it and not come up with the right number. Hopefully this is, for the most part, clear. There's one line I don't like, but
I took all your other suggestions, though. Yeah, I mean, Nick's right. It's just, and it doesn't read. Every town is different. And there's many towns that don't even have the definition of lot width, but every town is different. And if you're a surveyor who works in every town, you know, it can be tough to decipher sometimes. Most surveyors will call and ask, but some don't. And sometimes Nikki and I disagree on whether it complies or not. And that's, when we're on the same team and we're disagreeing, it's gotta be fixed. So this is our attempt. I think this is the last sentence you still don't like. But other than that, I think we're in agreement.
next to last.
Subdivision information?
This actually is less restrictive than it's written today.
But it's good, it's more understandable. Okay, any more questions on that one?
You know,
Are we on Article 15?
we can talk about OPEB for a long time tonight, but this stuff here.
I can get
If-
out the whiteboard and start drawing pictures.
And you sure that this is,
No.
'cause-
Not getting changed again,
okay.
not while I'm here. You can, yeah, put it on my forehead.
Okay.
Article 15.
Well, I'm
is-
not gonna leave. I'm really, I'm curious. What the minimum lot width shall be shown on subdivision and Form A plans. You don't like that?
Okay, next, the one before that, did you remove the part where it jumps over the?
Yes, you didn't like
You
it, I
did
took it
remove that,
out.
Okay,
Oh, so you're happy?
okay.
He's
Okay,
happy
I
with
withdraw,
everything.
Happy, but,
I withdraw my question.
Never happy, yeah, I mean, he's
no, don't say
He's-
that.
satisfied.
That-
Oh,
Nick's life, that's happy.
He's less upset.
Move on. Thank you.
Onward.
Okay, 15 is totally housekeeping. This is bringing our bylaw into conformance with the current Mass General Law. You had a special permit before, you had to pull a building permit within 6 months. The law got changed to 12 months, so we've made our bylaw 12 months, consistent with law. 16. We've only done this definition, I think. This is only the second time. I think we've changed this since I've been here. It's just our current definition of street. We had some issues with it in application, actually, particularly in the building department. And council basically said this was the best way to define it. And basically, this is defined in accordance with a section of the subdivision control law, Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 81. So, this is our definition of street. Again, another one.
Is this a major change to what we had before?
What we had before wasn't even really functional. It was really nebulous at best. So this is much better in terms of the fact that it is wholly consistent with the language of Mass General Law. So it's much better. 17 is housekeeping requested by the building department. They asked that specific fees not be listed in the zoning bylaw, and they shouldn't be. The Board of Selectmen would still have to vote in an open meeting to adjust these fees, so it's just not willy-nilly whatever the building department wants. But having town meetings with fees is a little onerous. While I was fixing 17, I noticed that 18 also needed to be fixed, because again, we list a specific violation fee, and that's already covered in our general bylaws under non-criminal disposition. So 18 is also housekeeping. 19 comes from a project we were reviewing inside South Sutton Commerce Park. Again, Nick brought up that it was very clear that the frontage on this project could be reduced to 100 feet in accordance with our bylaws, but that width was not addressed. The board could have made a finding in open meeting that, you know, because they're in the same column in the use table, they're one and the same. It could have been challenged. So the board said, look, they made the project make some adjustments, so we didn't have to make that interpretation, and the board said, fix it. So this is specifying that the lot, the frontage and the lot width of 200 feet are maintained, except when the lot is completely situated on the cul-de-sac. Now, that's still open to interpretation. Nick did ask us, or ask me, and I said what I thought what that meant, and the board seemed to agree with me, and we just left it at that.
You left what? You left what?
The
Cul-de-sac?
When the lot is, the phrase, completely situated on a cul-de-sac. What does that mean? So we went over what we think that means, what the current board's interpretation would be. And then, so the lot frontage could go down to 100 under our current bylaws, so this is where we put in what the width needed to be. So when you're on a cul-de-sac and you're already allowing to go from 100 to 200, that's increasing quite a bit the number of lots you could potentially have on that cul-de-sac. So we didn't want to maintain 100 feet. That would just create a lot of weird looking things. But the width is measured at 50 feet back. So I started drawing and doing geometry and blah, blah, blah. And you can't really jump. When you start to jump from 100 feet here to 200 feet at 50 feet, that doesn't work. So the number that I came up with was 100, the width has to go to 125. So your lot lines are skewing out, so you're not jamming a lot of little lots in on the end of an industrial cul-de-sac, and you have a more reasonable proportion.
So just one quick question on this, if there was debate on even the phrase of completely situated, should that be articulated more clearly in the article and in the bylaws?
We certainly could do that, and I believe Claire Kim, who was there last night, said, at least give us a definition of cul-de-sac. It's not, the definition of cul-de-sac wasn't advertised, so I can't come up with one and stick it in the definition section. We could certainly do something inside this language to say what we mean by completely situated on a cul-de-sac. That night, almost on the last article. The board just didn't want to go there.
Does the last sentence there where it says minimum width, does that refer to the lot width from Article 14? Should we put lot width in there?
Sure, we can put lot width. Insert the word lot. Absolutely.
Seeing how we just defined it so clearly.
Good catch. So I'll take a look at that prior sentence. If I can find some easy way to do that, it'll get done. Otherwise, we'll leave that for another day. I told you, job security. Okay, 20. Again, every time we work on a project, we find something that needs a little tweaking. And it was very clear that when you read through the common driveway bylaw that the intent was to allow common driveways in every district in the town, but it had been done kind of sloppily, and I'll take the hit for that because this bylaw was created under me and has been changed several times under me, sometimes by the board, sometimes by petition. But the words house and a private house lot, house numbers, those things remained in some of these sections. This is not just for houses, this is for structures, industrial structures, commercial structures, residential structures. So the first thing that needed to be cleaned up was anywhere that seemed to suggest this is only for houses. Then the board had a discussion on, in the beginning, common drives were only allowed if you were trying to get over a wetland, eliminate multiple wetland crossings, or deal with a ledge issue or a topographic issue. You couldn't just have them willy-nilly for any reason. And the board's feeling was they've been used willy-nilly for any reason lately, and they don't love it. And while things seem peachy keen in the beginning, 2 or 3 homes can share these common drives. So there's a real possibility at some point, once those first hopeful people move in, once house 2 or house 3 sells, that they could all hate each other and we'd get stuck in the middle of police calls on Joe not paying his part of the driveway plowing or whatever. So the board really likes that we have these available because there are obviously always topographic reasons, and you don't want to really deny people the use, a good use of their land, but you don't want just to create potential ground for arguments for no reason. So they changed that wording back to only to deal with topographic and or safety issues as determined by the planning board. So when you file for a common drive, you've got to show why you are dealing with a topographic or a safety issue. And then we didn't have separate standards in here for industrial commercial drives, so those have been inserted. Town council didn't like the way number 12 was written, so that changes you see in number 12 are from town council. And it's just about, any lot that's served by a common drive, they have to have a reference on their deed, either language right in their deed or a reference in their deed to a common drive restriction that basically says you're never gonna petition the town to make this a public way. And you all have to agree, however you wanna agree, we're not getting in the middle of it, that you'll maintain it and that you won't park on it, and that you guys are basically gonna take care of it. It's not on us. So he changed the language on 12 to make it something he thought was more legally palatable. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Planning board's been busy.
We're always busy.
Any further comments from the public? So 7:30, and we will close the public hearing. Thank you. That was actually fairly concise for 20 articles. So I think we have time to go through these and do quick votes on them and move forward. So the way we'll proceed the way we have normally done that with a A motion, a second, and a discussion, and then we'll vote. Absolutely, sure.
Before you start, I wonder if it'd be appropriate to add another article. Jim? I wonder if it'd be appropriate to add another article?
The warrant closed August, like, no.
Can I get a chair?
I thought that's been approved previous, and I know,
No,
it
we
may
were-
not have been
we were
approved,
waiting
it was
for someone, so
promised.
I just thought I'd give you a hard time.
It was budgeted for. We haven't decided what style is correct. So if you,
And depending on where you're sitting, you may not have one of those chairs.
I don't mean to be sexist, but aren't there any women that work in this building who can just go pick you a chair?
I've got
Wow.
Hold on.
people working.
I mean,
Can we just,
No,
I want to just clarify that comment was attributable to Pat
to me.
solely.
My wife doesn't let me pick out any furniture.
Diane, do you have any comment about that?
I'm holding back. We're on television.
I would choose you to pick any furniture.
Keep digging, Pat.
I'll get you a shovel. We have
No,
one
I'm
from when
already- I'm already
the
dead, I
buildings
know.
were started.
I'm not running for office.
Oh, goodness. Bring your own chair?
Yeah, I bring my own.
All right, we are,
On a different note, it's a good thing we didn't turn the lights down.
waiting for two members.
Two members before
Um,
we can start.
We're waiting for one member before we start. I think let's just move
Move forward.
with at least the discussion on it. We'll ask Bob as he comes in. So, Article 1 is really an adjustment to the budget. The cherry sheet adjustments were a negative. There should be brackets around that, 6407, I think. Negative 6,400. And then increase and appropriate from local receipts of 59,000, which was the amount needed to correct for, adjust for these additional amounts down below. So if we have a motion and a second on that,
Motion to accept Article 1 as written.
Second.
and discussion on Article 1. I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward. There will be a $12,000 spot somewhere in the budget going forward every year for the internet access, or internet
Storage.
expense, storage, correct. Let's hold off on the vote until Bob gets back. Let's move then to Article 2, which is to appropriate funds for the to the OPEB trust account in accordance with the OPEB policy that we have that's been established. Before we get to that motion, we had a motion and a second, Bob, on on Article 1, and if you have any questions or comments on that, proceed to a vote.
It's pretty clear, we have the money, so.
All those in favor of Article 1?
Aye.
Any opposed? No, passes unanimously, which is 3. Okay. So Article 2 is the OPEB, transferring funds to the OPEB account. If we can get a motion and a second on that.
Make a motion to approve Article 2.
Second.
Discussion and thoughts on that? No. I think that's a worthwhile transfer, and we're making progress on that liability. So all those in favor of Article 2?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? That passes unanimously. Article 3, this is the so-called bad bills article to pay a prior year invoice, roughly $17,000 to be paid out of the sewer department retained earnings. Motion and second.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second. This is gonna be paid, won't hit the operating budget, paid out of retained earnings. To me, I don't think there's any issues with that, unless anyone has any. All those in favor of Article 3? Aye. passes unanimously. Article 4, this is to appoint an additional member from the Board of Selectmen to the Police Station Building Committee. I think it's pretty much a housekeeping article, considering that Wendy Mead is on the Police Station Building Committee already. Motion and a second.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Article 4, all those in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. Article 5 is to transfer $150,000, which will come from new growth, to fully fund the special ed tuition stabilization fund, to a maximum of $350,000.
Motion to accept Article 5?
Second.
Discussion and
What's the fund that we set up, what, 2 years ago?
May town meeting of 2016.
And at
Correct.
the time, did we suggest it be 350 and we put 150 in?
We started with 200. We had a maximum amount of 350.
That was the wording we had it back then?
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
that was my only question, thank
Yep.
you.
Okay. All those in favor of Article 5? Aye. Any
Aye.
opposition? Article 5 passes 7-0. Article 6. Article 6 is entering into a lease for the sale of the gravel at the gravel pit. Motion and a second on that.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion on Article 6. I think that's to me, it's a positive.
Oh, it's absolutely, it's revenue
Positive,
sitting there for us.
absolutely, absolutely.
With maybe very little input from us
Yep.
financially.
Ultimately, long-term development of the property, I think, is the goal.
Oh,
So this
for sure.
is-
Yep.
And you look at the end of it, and if it has the water, the sewage,
Yep.
the railroad,
Do we have any, I assume we have, Jim, insurance coverage, liability insurance for that during the whole
Yeah,
process?
The winning proposer is gonna have to present insurance. The goal is to lease the property to the winning bidder. So really, they have to have their liability coverage, everything in order for the lease to be approved.
Okay. We had a motion and a second on that, right?
Yep.
All those in favor of Article 6?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, passes unanimously, 7-0. Article 7 is to acquire an easement on 16 Reservoir Avenue.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion on Article 7? I think it's pretty straightforward. All those in favor of Article 7?
aye.
Aye. Opposed, 0, 7-0 passed. Article 8 is to appropriate funds which will come from the connection fees account from the sewer department for designer service to bring sewer from the Pleasant Valley Villas to the center of town.
Motion to approve.
Second.
And discussion on Article 8.
My only comment is I thought, it ties to the WPI study, I thought we paid some money already towards studies, or was that all pro bono, the WPI?
No.
No.
WPI, I think it was a nominal amount, maybe $10,000, give or take, for them to study this issue. So it was a nominal amount.
Was the study useful, or is it? are we
It
gonna be
was
able to-
useful. I'm not a sewer engineer or anything, but Don Obachowski and the sewer commissioners felt it valuable to do that. And I think they've identified the location for a pump station, and how deep the sewer needs to go, and other factors that I can't really recall.
I mean, I thought it was helpful too. I mean, I'm not obviously an engineer either, but just in identifying issues and things that I hadn't thought of. But
Yeah, he did a lot of preliminary work, and I'm sure that work will be helpful to the designer of this project.
Yep.
When it comes up.
I mean, I think it's my feeling is it's a worthwhile project, almost a necessary project to bring that to the center of town. So
And then the end result, to bring it to the schools.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize there were that many issues with bringing it to the schools, but yeah, I mean, if that, ultimately, if that happens, that would be, if that works out, that'd be great.
Sue, do
Yeah.
you agree with those issues? There are issues down there.
Yeah, the studies that were done before, the current water will not supply when you take the gray water out of the equation, there's not enough water at the school. So it is an issue.
Interesting.
And you have to take the gray water out of the equation?
If you take the wastewater treatment plant offline, that's where the gray water comes from, so then you'd need to replace it with the wells, and the wells don't have enough capacity.
That's really the savings of this whole plan. Because if you have an operating wastewater system, that's the cost savings with providing sewer to it.
Save, what, 120 to 150, something like that a year if you could take it offline.
That's correct, yeah,
Right.
I think it's upwards of 150.
Yeah, but what would you have to pay in terms of wells and all of that stuff?
Yeah, I think the way it had been, I won't say presented, just talked about in recent years has been, if we could only bring it to the school, would save $150,000, but it's not that easy, you know, so. Okay, additional comments, thoughts?
I think the survey needs to be done, so.
Absolutely. All those in favor of Article 8? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, so now we get into the solar articles. So Article 9 will eliminate, just so I don't misspeak, will eliminate the solar overlay districts for large ground-mounted systems.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any thoughts on Article 9?
No?
I mean, I kind of understood it from the way the Board of Selectmen were talking about it, that it was clear that, you know, from the town meeting and so forth, that it made sense to do it. I didn't really understand, or wasn't aware of the planning board, or the other side, that it was not operative anyways, because, so.
I think there was significant debate at the last town meeting regarding this, and, you know, there was debate when this was voted in, so this seems like it's the best way to go so that we can progress forward for these other individuals that are looking to make some changes.
We had a motion on that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the motion.
Okay. All those in favor of Article 9? Aye. And that's unanimous. Article 10. This is the additional requirement of adding a special permit in addition to site plan review for the overlay districts that we just
Yeah,
recommended be eliminated.
Mr. Chairman, I feel a little uncomfortable discussing a lot of this because I have no expertise in this field. Not that I have any in any field, but you know, systems and sizes and ew. I don't see any. I like to add the numbers, but I can't add any numbers here.
Right.
Just my opinion.
You know, this is where we struggle with planning board issues, always on these, and I agree with you. Unfortunately, I think we have to go through it and do it.
Oh, yeah, I'm not saying we don't go through it, I'm just saying,
I think we've had times that, as a finance committee, we've said, perhaps this isn't in the best interest of the town. Other times, we've deferred to what the planning board recommendations were, so I think we can probably progress through these
Yeah.
with that in mind.
Yeah, and I think some of the, obviously, the ones that are related to solar are almost redundant in the sense that, you know, if Article 9 passes, these are, you know, articles that would come into play if they ever came back in future town meetings. So I think we can, you know, kind of go through them relatively quickly. So Article 10 is, again, requiring a special permit We'll do motion and seconds on these, and we'll go
Motion
quickly.
to approve Article 10.
Second.
Any further discussion on Article 10? I'm okay with the planning board recommendation on that. All those in favor?
Aye.
7-0, unanimous. Article 11, this is just changing the table of use regulations, again, with respect to Article 9 passing.
Motion to approve 11.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Abstain. Article 12,
This was the one that the planning board voted not to recommend the increase in footage.
correct. I think I understood it when Jen explained it. I'm not sure I understand
one you
it
mean,
today,
11
right
or
this
12?
minute, but,
12.
12.
12.
but we'll get a motion in a second on that.
So a point of order here, if you're against it, you still make a motion to approve it, and then you vote on it. One way or the other.
Then we'll vote.
Yeah, correct.
Yea-
I just
yea
want
or
to
nay.
make sure. So I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Again, this is planning board recommended not to approve, so all those in favor of Article 12?
I'm confused, is on this. And Jen, I'm trying to remember from what you said, I mean, did the planning board, if it had been 125 feet, would they have been happy?
No, they thought the 100 feet and the 200 feet were excessive.
Do they think 100 feet is excessive?
Yes, they thought because that's a line of clearing. So basically you can't touch, from the lot line to 100 feet, you can't touch anything. And then you gotta go in another 100 feet before you can put a solar panel.
Okay.
Under our current bylaws, you go 100 feet and you can put an industrial structure.
So can you clear cut the first 100 feet?
You can't touch it under this. So what we found on some other sites is, we had a proposal before the board preliminarily 2 weeks ago, where it was all white pine forest, and as you know, white pine, all the growth's up there, there's no understory. If we had had this in place, even if they hadn't touched the first 100 feet, you could still see panels at 200 because there was no coverage, understory coverage. Part of the discussion with the board in their hearing was, you're using an arbitrary number when really the consideration should be, what are we doing for, what exists for existing vegetation, and what are we adding for screening and vegetation or
Wasn't this
fencing?
addressed last town meeting, that, one of the last articles where they had to have
We had it.
vegetation and planting and all that kind of thing?
One of the proponents proposed additional regulations.
And that
was
passed.
part of the, yes, and that was part of the discussion at the planning board hearing. If you think about what they added at the last meeting, and that now you're also hopefully going to require sight lines to really understand what you will see and what you won't, and what needs to be done, you really don't need to put in some arbitrary numbers here that might not even work. It's more important that you focus on what is going to be between the lot line and the panels, not how much distance is there. And the distance that's proposed, again, is more than is required to put a factory next to a house.
And just to be clear, this is again on the overlay districts that we just voted to.
This is if they're ever allowed in the residential areas again.
And this particular one is excessive, but adding a site plan review is not, a special permit is not excessive?
No.
Okay,
No,
just,
special permit's about more than distance, it's very broad.
okay.
So, I apologize, you
No,
were gonna
go ahead.
speak.
No, go ahead.
So, I better understand what you're saying now than before. So if I might make a suggestion, the commentary needs to be changed. The commentary should read, we made changes at the last town meeting, and now we have site review and special permits, so that, if we wanna build a 30-foot fence and plant arborvitae or something like that, we can put it in. when I read this, I mean, you know, this is just me, I left with the feeling that you could build like the one they just did in Millbury, which they clear cut right to the property line, right?
Yeah, and under our existing regs,
And also,
you
it,
could, but the way it's worded, you wouldn't allow them to do that. Like, there's nothing preventing them from clear cutting to the line, but the wording says you've gotta create an effective visual buffer. So if you clear cut to the line,
Well,
boy, you're
I'm-
spending a lot of money adding stuff back in.
I don't, we're splitting hairs.
Yes, that's exactly what
If our rules say you can clear cut, you can clear cut.
Yes.
If our rules say that you have to have something for sightline, then it's for sightline. You cannot have both. So which do we have?
We have both. There's nothing in our bylaw.
Does this clear it up?
With the
Does this
addition of
clear it up?
13, you have it cleared up, I believe.
With
without
number
No, they just have to,
12.
they just have to give photographs
No,
for 13.
Number 12, what number 12 would do is it would impose 100 feet of no clear cut. So like you couldn't touch anything in the first 100 feet.
Okay,
So, yeah, so that would add a clear cut restriction, which we don't have a clear cut restriction now, but we do have a requirement that you have to visually buffer it. So in reality, most people or most projects don't clear cut to the line because then they just have to plant or put.
but that's not
fences.
true. If you go to Millbury, they clear cut right to the property line.
Yeah, but Millbury's bylaw doesn't
Yeah, but no, but you,
read
I-
like
I-
that.
I'm not trying to argue with you, but your comment was you went from town to town to see, you find some white pines, and you looked at what others did. So I'm citing you one where they clear cut right to the town line. They had a tremendous erosion problem. So if this is close to me, okay, I would want as much buffer as I could get so that it's still a viable project. I like the tax dollars and everything else. I'm not opposed to that. But if we don't have anything in the bylaw, then what you're saying is, let's leave it to the planning board and hope that it doesn't happen late at night when they're tired. You said when they got tired, they didn't want to vote.
There is nothing in the bylaw that says you can't clear cut right now.
Okay.
There is absolutely nothing. There's a whole bunch of stuff in the bylaw that says there has to be a very effective visual buffer. So it says you leave the buffer in its naturally vegetated state or you upgrade it. That's been interpreted different ways on different projects, depending on what you have to do on each project. So like on Oakhurst Road, if you look at the solar on Oakhurst Road, it was a field with some scrub brush. They left it that way. It didn't mess with their shading or anything, so they left the field and the scrub brush, and the board required some additional plantings, which never grew, so they're requiring some more as we speak. But on 146, you were dealing with a slope, the one that comes southbound on 146. So to get the panels and the fencing in, they literally had to clear cut the whole center of the site, and then the board allowed them to cut down to 5 feet high on the rest of the site. They got in there and they violated the permit because they were pulling boulders out, and as they pulled the boulders out, they pulled out most of the 5-foot high brush that they cut down to. So it's interesting, to say the least. This one is only for installations in residential districts, and Clara, I didn't do the investigation, Clara Kim did the investigation into the bylaws, and she found many towns that define by clear-cut lines instead of setbacks or lot lines. They use the phrase clear-cut. Our bylaw, none of our bylaws use the word clear-cut. In the town of Sutton, you can
Right.
clear-cut it, and you could go home and clear-cut your entire lot tomorrow, and as long as it's not in wetland jurisdiction, it's allowed.
Thank you. I mean, I know how I'm gonna vote on this, but my commentary still stays the same, is that I would suggest, if I were making the presentation at the town meeting, that the commentary needs to be clarified,
Yeah,
that it's,
I'm happy to table it
that
again.
it's, at least to me, it's not clear. Thank you. Thanks for letting me rattle on.
No, that's fine.
So for a point, are we can have our recommendation be against the passage of this particular bylaw as opposed to approving and saying nay, so that it's clear and.
Well, then we have to vote.
We
Do
still
we
have to
have a
vote.
motion
We're
to
gonna have a vote, and if we vote to oppose Article 12, which is what the planning board recommended.
Right now, we have a motion to approve, so we
Right,
need
so
a
we would
yay
have to
or a
vote
nay
in the
vote.
negative if we were gonna go
Correct.
along with the planning board. Right, and so your question was?
So I think, potentially for clarification purpose, we may want to remove the previous motion and have the motion be against the.
No, you can,
You can just vote nay.
No, you vote nay.
Still think it gets confusing.
I think it's correct with Robert's rules, but we always find it confusing as well, so we always do it the wrong way.
How about we do this? All those opposed to Article, well, no, I guess I can't do that, yeah.
We have a motion to
You
approve.
already have a motion in front of you.
Okay.
Okay, all those in favor of Article 12? All those opposed to Article 12?
No, isn't it all those, sorry, I'm
Yep.
not gonna,
Go-
I thought we were looking for a yay or a nay.
We are looking for a yay or a
Correct.
nay. So, all those in favor of Article 12, state yay.
Yes.
All
I
the-
want, but may I ask for clarification on my vote?
Absolutely.
I want the 100 untouched and the 200 separate. I disagree with the planning board. So therefore, I'm in favor of 12.
But not terminology?
No, I don't care how they write it. I mean,
All
the
right.
commentary.
I'm gonna hold on.
I'm in favor of
let's-
Article 12 to require lot lines remain untouched for 100 feet and 200 feet separation from the lot lines to the solar panels.
So you want to agree to their motion not to approve?
No, I want the
Okay,
article.
yeah.
I
You
don't
want
agree with the
article.
planning
We're
board.
gonna
You're
start
not
this vote
following
all
the
over
planning
again,
board's
because we're all
recommendation.
confused about that. Just so we're, I won't say clear, but just,
Do you want me to get out, I mean,
No.
visual is sometimes easier. Do you want me to?
No?
Just a voting procedure that I think we're
No,
struggling with.
no, it's just the rules of order that we need to make certain
Yeah.
that we're
Right.
very clear on.
the only issue that the planning board had with this was they felt it was excessive. Not that there was anything wrong with it, they just thought it was redundant,
So they thought it was excessive.
excessive.
They thought the 100 feet was excessive. They thought the 200 feet was excessive for a solar installation. Because when you look at the rest of our bylaws, our bylaws right now say you can have an industrial plant within 100 feet of a lot line. This is saying, if you put in a solar installation, 10-foot high panels that don't make any noise, have no employees or trucks or vehicles, that's gotta be 200 feet away. That made no
Sounds
sense
excessive.
to the board.
Yeah.
That made no sense to the board. And then with respect to the 100 feet clear cut, it's not that they didn't think there was some number that should maybe be left alone, 25 feet, 50 feet, whatever it is. But they didn't have any visual examples of that. And with the existing bylaw that says you have to create a visual buffer, with the additional language that was added at that last meeting, which creates even more layers of landscaping, and the fact that they're going to require sight lines so you can actually see, this is where the panels are, this is where we're looking from, and this is all the stuff I'm adding in between, that you did not need you did not need 100 feet of just solid, unclear-cut area. That it might, and we talked at length about, so what's the number? Is it 50? Is it 25? Is it 70? And the board said, we don't have any, we're just pulling a number out of a hat at this point. And they went back to, we have more language based on the last town meeting. We now require site distances. We've got what we need.
So what Pat was referring to, Milbury, where he said they clear cut to the property line, you're saying that they can or cannot do that?
I don't know, Milbury's right.
No, here. does this article say that,
This language specifically says that the line of cutting will be at least 100 feet off.
so that's prohibiting clear cutting to the property border?
From the property line out to 100 feet, which the very first comment the board made was, oof, that's pretty restrictive, and then even more restrictive is then you push the panel another 100 feet when everywhere else in our active districts are in, you can have a factory itself within 100 feet of a residential lot line.
See, the only thing, though, Jen, is all these other articles that we have are putting in additional restrictions on solar overlay districts. And then this one is saying the opposite.
Well, this one is trying to make even more regulations on solar, only if it's in the residential or village districts at some point.
But
But the board just thought it was too much. They're just going too far.
But this does prohibit
Clear cutting
clear cutting to the,
Clear
within 100.
which we know was done in the next town. When the-
Yeah, to Pat's point, this says you can't clear cut in that 100-foot zone,
Absolutely does.
and you have to have 200-foot separation. So it's saying, in the instance of the solar panel, we're saying you need to do more than a regular industrial zone.
But in May, we passed, if you're foolish enough to clear cut 100 feet, you're gonna have to pay money to replace back with vegetation the buffer, because that's what we passed in May.
And create a
And I'm,
effective
and
visual screen.
the whole point of all this is to make sure that it's not sitting out in open, and that's what that visual buffer that we passed in May, the screening vegetation, is already giving us. I think this is excessive. Can we vote?
Correct, but on the other hand, you look at what Jen said on 2 installations that are in place, where they said you had to plant something, and the plantings failed, or the organization failed to comply with the requirements. So this gives you a little bit of a safety measure of you can't clear cut stuff and have
Were
to
those,
replace it.
were those installations in prior to our May buffer zone? Yes, no?
So failed plantings and
Yeah,
failure
the one
to
on 146
comply,
was,
should-
Yes.
but there's no reference to what we passed. So, see, that's what bothers me, is that, you know, I don't have the what was passed, so this just says it's excessive. Sorry, I don't remember what we did, and what was passed and what wasn't passed. And so what I'm saying is, without a delineation of a site setback, a setback review and no recommendation from the planning board, some requirement is needed.
you know,
So related to all that, my question is, who determines effective visual screen?
Planning board.
I mean, who's gonna go out to the site and say, this meets effective visual screen or not?
After it's in,
Correct.
every permit we issue, whether it's solar, industrial, the board reserves the right to review plantings and screening after the installation to see if they've met the intended purpose. So,
And that happens prior to them being able to flip on the switch and connect, right?
it happens in different stages. It can happen at any point, like the solar on Oakhurst Road, there's a bunch of the trees that are huge. They were little, and they grew. The rest of them, the board lovingly calls shrubbettes. They were supposed to grow 60 to 70 feet at 3 to 4 feet a year. They're still 6 feet. So the board they came back 2 years after the fact and said, so much for your 60 to 70 foot trees. These need to be replaced. You need to find out what happened. So they can come back at any point and say, that's not achieving the visual screening. You need to fix it.
Do these people leave a bond so that you make this done, and the bond is for the
The
30
bond
years of the panels?
The bond is a decommissioning bond. But we have enforcement, basically you can rescind the approval. You could technically take the crazy step of shutting them down, making them disconnect, if they didn't comply. Normally, we would just, at times, we would make the improvement and put a lien against the project, or there's various legal ways to make them do it. We've never had anybody push back.
Are they replanting the trees in the place that have the shrubbettes?
Yes.
Are they fixing 146?
146, the board made them do an additional, I believe it was 70 plantings, and those were all in before we let them turn the switch on. notice it. The people on Oakhurst down in the south side of town, none of the abutting neighbors said a word. 'Cause it's really a very flat installation. It's not like the 146. So even though you can see the top of the panels, it doesn't bug anybody. So it was just on a recent inspection where I said, wait, those aren't screened. Look at these shrubbettes. So, and we have the right in every permit to go back at any time and say, you didn't comply, fix it. So, but 146 was flagged very early by the staff and by abutters. And so that got fixed like immediately before they even turned it on.
So, do we think we're ready to move the previous question?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that, I'm not sure how that can be excessive if we're allowing clear cutting already I thought I didn't think we could go to the property border. And 2 years later, when the trees fail, still you're living with that for 2 years, and so I think I'm with Pat on this one.
Yeah, but I guess if you're feeling like we don't have a good reg, does it mean we put a overly excessive reg in place, or do we petition the right reg? Or whatever you think is the right reg?
Yeah. I mean, all things considered, 200 feet isn't very much. On a property that you're putting the large ground-mounted solar voltaic,
Have the planning
installation.
board come back with a firm recommendation as opposed to we're not sure what it means, and then change it again. There aren't any pending permits to build these.
Okay, so we can move that question now. So all those in favor of Article 12, say aye. 3. All those opposed?
Aye. Nay. Or nay,
I'm
whatever
in
you want.
favor of it, I'm sorry, I was
Okay.
daydreaming on it.
Too much discussion?
Yeah.
I'm totally confused. No, it's just,
Article 12, our recommendation is to approve Article 12 by a vote of 4 to 3. So in our recommendations, we can,
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to write that one down.
that's why we have YouTube. Article 13, what is that? Oh, this is the sightline, requiring photographs and so forth. I don't think there's a lot.
You can have that if you want.
Motion and a second on that one.
Motion to approve as written.
Second.
Discussion on Article 13. All those in favor of Article 13? Aye.
aye.
It's unanimous on that. Article 14 is clarifying lot width, the definition of. Motion and a second on that one.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion?
I can tell you from 20-plus years on the zoning board, 105 years ago, this came up more than anything else we did, is, can somebody tell me how wide that lot is, and ones that go like this, are they okay?
Really? Okay.
I think this is well-written, and it's about time.
With that, then, all those in favor of Article 14?
Aye.
Aye. That is also unanimous. Article 15 is
Housekeeping.
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 Motion to approve Article 15.
Second.
Housekeeping article, all those in favor?
Aye.
Article 16 is changing the definition of street.
Motion to approve.
Second.
No one, is
I have a
anybody,
desire to move this.
all those in favor of Article 16?
Aye.
Aye, that is unanimous. Article 17,
Striking the fee amounts.
striking the fee amounts.
I make a motion to approve Article 17.
Second.
All those in favor of Article 17?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Article 18,
Motion to approve.
Second.
again, striking that, the fees. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, 7-0. Article 19. Oh, boy.
Motion to approve.
The word lot
Lot width,
inserted in front of width.
Yep.
right. Those in favor of Article 19?
Aye.
Aye.
And last but not least, Article 20, which, not sure we can classify it as housekeeping, but it's just adjustments to the common drive definition, the annual adjustment article to that. Motion,
Motion to approve Article 20.
discussion, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that is also unanimous. And that is that. Any other business? And motion to adjourn.
Second.
And we are adjourned.
Get your hammer.
Come on.
Thank you, Jen. Thanks for coming.
Very powerful tool.
It is. Thanks, Jen.
We